Saturday morning and it's supposed to be a fine day. I'm going to be working on the study, replacing the ceiling, painting, putting in new insulation. Stopped Bunnings on the way home yesterday. That was a spur of the moment, just a cheap wet and dry vacuum by Zito. Had to get more gyprock plaster, like jointing compound. But I also got in this box, which I am going to unwrap because I'm not going to try and carry the whole thing out myself. Might be able to just see. It's a panel lifter for plasterboard. There's no way I'm lifting that on my own. So I'm going to get some scissors and cut the box open and take it down part bit by bit. All cardboard. That's a swivel. One of the arms. Another arm. Take this down. And the rest of it is basically these two arms, which are extension arms. These will slide out to support your longer sheets, so they can go from your 2.4 to your 2.7 to your 3.6 or 3.3, whichever the next one's in. No, it's 3.6. This one goes out to 3.3, which means it should hold a 3.6 board, but I'm not likely to use any of those. You've just got the tripod base, which is all one part. And then the beautiful part of it is this big arm in the middle with the crank, which allows you to put the, once you've got the plasterboard on, just lift it up to the ceiling, all the way up to the joist, the ceiling joist, screw it in place. When I was leaving work yesterday, I messaged my wife, said, leaving work, and she messaged back via Bunnings. And I said, for what? She rang me and she said, well, you need to get the stuff to do that room. The weather's meant to be really nice this weekend, so it'd be a perfect time to try and do it. We did get the majority of the stuff out of there in order to do some work in there. Now I've just got to get the rest of it out. I got my desk out of there last night. Got to move some other stuff out today so I can access everything easily, because it's not a really big room. And I said I'm going to go and hire one of those panel lifters, and she said, yeah, good idea. When we first started renovating, my wife and I would stand on little step ladders and lift up the plasterboard, and I would drive in screws. Not spring chickens anymore. I can barely lift stuff above my shoulders anymore since my neck surgery, which hasn't helped completely. I've gone all numb in my hands again and my left arm, pain through the shoulder from the pinched nerves. Lifting stuff up above my head that's got any weight to it isn't very workable. I could still lift a sheet of plasterboard, just not above my head. My old next door neighbour used to own one of those. He probably still does it, it's just that he's no longer my neighbour. He had one of those panel lifts, and he loaned it to me to do my kitchen ceiling, and then again when I did one of the bedrooms. Absolute game changer. Just being able to put your sheet of plasterboard onto this thing, flip it flat, wind it up, get it lined up where you want it on the ceiling, another little crank that pushes it and holds it there, and you get up and put all your screws in. So I stopped at Bunnings because they actually seem to have one of the best prices for hire. It was $40 a day. I said, look, if I pick this up tonight to use on the weekend and drop it back in on the way to work on Monday morning, what's the fee? It's basically 3 days, $120. Their 7-day hire, $168, which is obviously better value. I wouldn't want to be trying to do it over that sort of a time, but you never know what could happen. And I had been looking at what they cost to buy. The cheapest one I saw was, I think, $199. I saw them online for like $209, $219, whatever. I saw them at a place at Seven Hills for $269, but then it said, when I had a close look, yeah, we don't have a showroom. You basically order it online. They give you times that you can come and pick it up. And then Sydney Tools, which is about 2 minutes from Bunnings, had them for $2.99. Because it's the end of financial year, where they normally close at 5:30, they're actually open till 7, and it was 5:33. I just drove over there, said they had limited stock there. Penrith said they had no stock. So Minchinbury, I went in there, said, have you got panel lifters in stock? And they brought it up on the screen. They said, these? And I said, yep. How many do you want? And I said, just one. Yes, we do. We're going to pay for it now. We'll go grab it. And I said, yep. And off they went. The other young blokes was the one who served me when I picked up the little Bosch drills and driver sets, 12-volt system for school. And he asked how they were going. I said, great, good weight. Kids love them. So they went and grabbed it. 2-man lift, brought it down the stairs. And I just went outside because everything was paid. Opened the back of the ute, and they just slid straight in. And then I went back to Bunnings and got the mudding compound and the other stuff I wanted to get. Now we've already got plasterboard that we bought to do the laundry, which I haven't continued with at the moment. We've also got a lot of insulation for there. I don't need to buy any of that. I had considered trying to get 2.7 metre sheets for that room, because the room is 2.7 by 2.7. However, I did think if it's just off, I'm going to be struggling to push that thing up. So 2.4s and then a 1 foot 30 centimetre section at the end. My wife then said, look, I found somewhere that has a desk on Marketplace, which is why I'm in the car now. The antique vanity that I had found on the side of the road and fixed up. When she sat at it, the middle section, because it drops down, she said it's actually too low. I don't like sitting that low. You want to be up at a decent side on your stool or chair. And with it dropped down as well as the drawer, she said it's just too low. She's found this desk a bit further down the mountain. I'm heading down there to pick that up. And my wife said, how long did you get the lift for? I said, well, I went and bought one. She goes, what? It was going to cost me $120 to hire. It cost me $2.99 to buy. She goes, $2,900. I said, no, $299. I have seen a lot more expensive ones. $500, $800, $1,000. Oh, that ATM's gone. It's been a while since I've actually used cash. ATM has disappeared. I've got to get cash to go and get this desk. Grab some cash, go down, get this desk, come back, put it somewhere, get on with the process of the room. So yesterday was productive. Well, last night I should actually say, when I finally got into it, got all the plasterboard down. Pro tip, hang on to your plasterboard really well when you're dropping it down from the ceiling, otherwise it slips out of your hand and punches into the wall, so I'm gonna have to patch that. here's the ridiculous thing about this house. You can see that the insulation is up above, look, above these. They're basically running between the upper frame, because this is like the ceiling frame, and then there's framing going that way to hold the roof. This is a flat roof, or a skillion roof. It's almost flat completely. So they've got all of this right up against the tin, and in some places it wasn't staying up there, it was falling down, like you can see here. But that means that any hot air that manages to get into this space just transfers straight through into your rooms. So when I redid the bedroom, I put the insulation just above the ceiling. Because it'll also, if you just have plasterboard and no insulation directly above it, the heat in your room will go through that plaster and just escape into your roof. Whereas if you insulate directly above it, that's going to help it to stay in your room more. Now this is all very old, you can see a bit dirty there, but we've also had mice, rats. So I want to get all of this down, replace it with the newer stuff that we've got, which is in the shed, so I should have enough there. Put up a new ceiling. I will only be able to insulate as far as the hallway, and that'll just happen at a different time. That's the way this sort of a renovation goes when you're working in amongst it. Another thing about having the insulation up like this, there was a small patch on the ceiling right here that had started developing like mold. If you see where I've got this plastic, that's the roof out here. There was never insulation there, because it wasn't part of the house. So this whole strip of this room had no insulation. And because I was just trying to block off this space from having anything being able to just sort of crawl through into the roof from that area, I put up the builder's plastic, stop drafts going through. But you'll notice pieces falling down. So cold air and moisture was coming directly from the tin onto the roof here, and that's what was causing the mold. Consistent moisture going straight onto the top of the ceiling. Recently, the light was there. You can see this dirt blowing through here where another part's fallen down. It was somewhere where all of this stuff, because I was poking this up last night, but there was another spot right here, and it just had a mold patch starting. And when you looked at the top, it just had moisture, evidence of leaking moisture coming through. Whereas if you put your bats right against all these timber beams down low, you're not going to get moisture onto your ceiling. Because having these also right up against the tin prevents any airflow through that area. Even though there's not much airflow through our roof anyway, but you know what I mean? Anyway, I'm about to pull all this down, bag it up, clean the tin if I need to, go and get the other insulation to put. Now when you're going to deal with insulation, fogging up, you need to have glasses or goggles, a mask so you're not breathing in the nasties, gloves because this is fiberglass insulation and it can be irritating. And I put a hat on so I don't go getting fibres all in my head. The insulation that we bought to redo the ceiling last time, see the slightly browner colour? It's like a rock wool insulation. It's more natural, it's not as nasty. And I'm pretty sure that's what we bought for downstairs. That's where, because I haven't finished the laundry, I've got stacks of insulation in the shed, which was meant for the laundry. I'm going to use it here. And in this little lower wall, there was no insulation. And these are just an MDF panel. I'm going to replace that with plasterboard, a bit more insulating because this is only like 6mm. Plasterboard's going to be 10, but I can use those to mark out and cut the piece exactly when I get to it. But insulation ceiling first. Straight away, see what I'm noticing here? That's all water on there. All this condensation on the roof. Because there's no airflow, it's all pushed right up against it. Far out. Now I can probably already hear you saying, I've seen new builds and they put the insulation sheeting over the top of the timber framing and then put the tin directly on it. And that's correct. But when you see that, you'll see many more cross members. Like, you see that one there, and this one here. When they do that sort of stuff with a sheet roof, there's a lot more cross members, and the sheeting goes over it, and then the iron gets put straight on it. But that sheeting has the foil on both sides of it, with the insulation trapped inside. They then tape the joints. The foil is an insulation, moisture, and air barrier for those sort of roofs. So when they have a high-pitched roof where it just follows the pitch of the roof, that's what that's like. This isn't what this is like. This was just putting insulation on top of the old stuff. They've even had bits of timber up there trying to hold it up because it's not how it's supposed to be done. It's meant to be in between the ceiling joists, all of these. That's why insulation batting comes in those width. Stupid. Alright, I'm going to wipe all this moisture down. So we are going to use the sound screen ones. These are the sound insulation bats, water repellent. R2 value, now the R values are different in Australia compared to the US and Europe. The numbers all don't mean the same thing, so, but I do know that our insulation here also isn't as insulating as it might be in a very cold climate area. So these are for 450 stud spacing, which is what these are. You never know, I may end up replacing that stuff with this stuff in future when I sort of do more work next door. So I'm going to start putting this up. The room's had a chance to dry out, like the roof looks good now, apart from like those little bits you might be able to see the water droplets just around the timber. The new fixture is going to be a fixture that has lights and a fan in it, so I've got to put some extra timber in across here because the sound of the room, right where that line is, and 70 mil this way. So I need to have some good timber here to support a fan with lights. I haven't done the end yet. The bats are designed for a 450 centre spacing. 450 is the centre's spacing of the joists. They're not called joists in the ceiling. Rafters. It's the spacing for the rafters. The bats are actually 430, so they're slightly wider than the space they've got to go into. And these ones being the insulation for the sound insulation, they're a little bit more rigid. You push them up and they stay. Then you put your ceiling up. The end part, the end there, because it's where there's a wall between two rooms. They've had to put a rafter either side of the wall so there's somewhere to screw your ceiling to, which means that that is narrower than 450. So I'm doing all the 450 spaces first, which is the rest of the room. I'll probably cut the ones here for the here where the light's got to come through, the wiring. I'll cut the insulation so that the wiring just sits in between the two pieces, and then I can put some extra noggin pieces of timber to actually support the fan, and then continue on with my ceiling bats. As they go through this wall, I can continue them right through where there's no interference, where there's cable going down through the wall, as in here where the light switch comes down the wall here, and this one over here, the far one, goes to a power point. It actually probably goes to both power points because there's power points on this wall and the other side of this wall in the hallway. And that looks like that's going straight down to that. I'll have to cut the insulation around those cables as well. I'll get on with it. Cutting insulation is really easy too. I've got an old, I think this was an old fishing knife, to go into the space of the hallway to where the insulation stops, where I pulled the other stuff out. It's currently 70, so put a mark at the 70. As long as you're nice and sharp. Like a hot knife through butter, as the saying goes. So very easy. Same thing if you, like when I've got to do the other ones, they'll be long straight cuts. I'll just measure how far and just watch my line, make it just a little bit bigger so that the friction will hold it up. So that goes into the hallway a little bit past where this insulation is still up nice and high. Ceiling insulated. I'm going to go and bring up my plasterboard hoist. I'm hoping I can work around the wardrobe, that I can just slide the wardrobe backwards and forwards in the room in order to do it. I just remembered I've got to put that noggin and stuff in there for So I'll go and do that first. And then I'll bring my hoist up. And the plasterboard, that is going to be one interesting journey. Of course, our house is full of lots of little awkward corners. When I come up the stairs here, it'll come up. I might be able to walk into the caddy corner into the bathroom and then slide it into here. It's not an easy house to carry 4 sheets of plasterboard in. First one was snug. Put the thing in upside down. Bloody hell. But that one's not quite as snug. The screws for the fan are at a maximum of like 125. 125 is right there, so there's all this space in between, and I want to make sure there's enough room to fill around with the wiring. Yeah, that one's a little loose. So they're in so that the fan can be secured. So it's not just hanging from plasterboard. Because like I said, the centre of the room is probably about here, just to the right of the cords. I need to mark that up there. And that dark line there, that's the centre of the room line. Now try and get this set up. They take up a fairly big footprint, and this is a small room. So the tripod legs open out and lock, like so. This sucker like that should be going down a little. Just like that. Usually has 2 sets of locks. Like that. Get you out to your lock position. This part goes on like so. point, you should be basically pushing your plasterboard right against the ceiling. Automatic brake, so that part, that's what allows you to tip it, but it won't do it like that. It stops you from fiddling around too much. And spin it around once you've got it on, it tilts that way. You've got wedges here. And a clip, so that won't come back out. It does take up a lot of space. These arms, slide into here. There's a couple of indentations, depending on how big a piece you're using. So I'll get them in there. It'll probably be no, not even that. I think there and the other one out, that would give me my, oh jeez, I just forget. That gives me my 2.4 metre length, my 2400. So I get these on here, kind of get your wheels out of the way. You flip this up like this, lift your sheet on, so you've still got to do a bit of lifting. Of course you can't do, this won't go down any lower. So you lift it onto these. This holds your sheet. You rest against the rest of the legs. Tilt it up and lock it. Wheel yourself into the position you want. Wind them up and basically get those out of the way so you can get right up against the edge of the wall. I need to see if I can get that plasterboard up here. Oh wow, this takes up a lot of space. So working around that wardrobe is going to be dicey. First one's going to be about here. This will only come out to just before the light. And from that side, so there'll be a little bit left on that side. What would be ideal is to use 2.7 metre sheets, because that's the full length of the room. And that way you'd only have one straight join there, one straight join there. But you just can't get 2.7 metre sheets up into this house when everything's in the house. I did it once before, redoing the ceiling of the wardrobe in the end bedroom, 2.7 metre sheet. But I cut it to size in the back of the van because it only, I think it was 600 or 700 deep. So that was easy to carry up. I need as much space as I can get. That should allow me to bring the sheet in. But I've got to get it all the way past the door. we'll figure it out. Now for the heavy one. Well, I'm not up to doing the cornice yet. I came down to get my plasterboard adhesive and saw this best before April 15. I did not think it was that long ago that I did the last bedroom, but it's quite possible. That's pretty much had it. There wasn't much left in it. That's spongy, but not really worth trying to use, and there wasn't much left. This one, fairly moist in there and mold growing. So I'm glad I picked this up the other day.